Appleknocker Radio.
All right, greetings, friends. My guest today is South African author and artist Gadd. Anne has written about multiple subjects in the past, but today we're going to be talking about her new book, Better Parenting with the Enneagram. I have very much been looking forward to this conversation because I've been intrigued by the Enneagram ever since I discovered it when I was early teens, and I stumbled upon GI Gurdjieff and started reading Gurdjieff. He was really the first person who sent me on this seeking quest, this quest to understand life and reality and God and consciousness and all of these things. But where Gurdjieff brought the symbol forward, it was more of a... it was actually very complicated. I'm not even exactly sure how Gurdjieff specifically used it, except that he talked about it being a course of how creation itself happens, like how life itself happens. But then later, you started to see the Enneagram popping up for use in psychology and just general self-help type things as a personality identification tool and as a tool for personal self-transformation, which is how Anne uses it. Now, her prior books have been called, have been about sex in the Enneagram and about the Enneagram of eating. The book about sex is kind of goes without saying. The book about eating is how you can use knowledge about your personality type to eat healthy and to live a healthy life. And so the thing that I really like about Anne's approach to this is that she uses the Enneagram, which is kind of a arcane, strange, mysterious symbol, but she uses it for very practical things that just about anybody can understand or anybody can use, right? And so I found that very interesting, and I also I've always wondered how the Enneagram was actually used in a practical sense. As when I was young, I read it, just like I said, it was this, to me, vague and abstract kind of thing. And so I'm really intrigued, but I get to hear about how it's actually functionally used. And Anne does an excellent job of explaining that. She does an excellent job of explaining how you can use the Enneagram to improve your own life, and specifically how you can use it to be a better parent. And by better parent, she's not saying it's not only about being a more effective parent to your child, but being a parent who's happier, healthier, maybe feeling a little more sane as you're trying to maneuver through this process of being a parent, which is, it can try anybody's soul, right? It can try anybody's limits and creates a lot of self-doubt, those kind of things. Well, Anne's book is here to help, and it's a great conversation. I really appreciated Anne's time. I really enjoyed the conversation. Definitely gave me a lot of food for thought. And so with no further ado, I'll quit yapping, and I will go over to the interview. So this is Anne Gadd, author of Better Parenting with the Enneagram. Thank you very much, friends. Peace out. All right. Could you just start out explaining how you got into the Enneagram to begin with, how you started using it as the tool?
I was a workshop junkie in my youth. So if there was any workshop on anything from astrology to healing with crystals to finding your inner feminine self, I'd done it, yeah? So when my brother gave me this book, The Wisdom of the Enneagrams, I incredibly arrogantly went through it, mistyped myself, as one does, and then said, oh, this is just another personality profiling system, and gave him back his book. It was only a couple of years later I went and saw another book on the Enneagram, and they combined it with yoga. And so I bought that book, brought it home, and got my husband. I mean, he's a 5, yeah? So it was just as if
That's the investigator?
Yeah.
That's what I score as too. Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
So he, the very cerebral, observing kind of type of person, yeah? So it was as if someone had written a book about him. I mean, it was that personal. Things he said, things he did, his man cave. I mean, oh my goodness, that man cave that you were not allowed to enter. All that stuff was there. And I thought, actually, there's really something about this. So I was really blown away. And then I revisited it. And that's when I found myself, after quite a long journey, it must be said, and really came to respect the teachings, because it's obviously not just about a personality profiling system. It's way more than that. And it really gives you a very definite way to grow and become more aware of yourself. Because despite having done all these workshops, I really realized that I didn't know myself. And I had done some therapy and I had done all the stuff, but it was only with the Enneagram that it really showed me aspects of myself that had remained hidden to me, my motivations and so on. So it was based on that I started studying it, which is now about 30 years ago. And I was lucky enough to do 2 workshops here in Cape Town with Ross Hudson, which was a real privilege. And I did some other workshops and so on. And so I just wanted to know more. And the more books I read, the more I wanted to read. And that set me off on a journey of discovery. And I was already a writer. So then I just wanted to investigate different subjects. And how they're related to the Enneagram.
So, we're going to talk specifically, we're going to focus today on your series, your kids series for how to use the Enneagram for kids. But in general, can you explain how does the Enneagram work, if that can be conceptualized in a relatively brief fashion?
Okay, we come into this world, and most of us come in with one or other neurosis. And what we then do is spend the rest of our lives with the aided and abetted by our egos to try to protect us from these fixations. And so we build up a personality based around how we're most going to protect ourselves and how we're going to fend off these deep inner fears that we all have. And of course, it doesn't work because it's based on fear. And what the Enneagram really helps us do is to understand the core of our personality and then strip away the layers of the personality so we can be actually who we truly are. We can be our authentic selves. We don't need to carry this mantle of personality in order to feel okay in the world. So it's very different from like the Myers-Briggs or any of those systems that sort of say, this is what you are. The Enneagram describes the box that you put yourself in and then gives you a very definite way to get out of that box.
And so this might be too broad of a question, but so generally when you conceptualize it, like, why do you think, why would we be born that way? Why is this specific, like, archetypal challenge given to any given person?
Because we're here, this is Earth School. We're here to learn. And so the way to learn is to work through what is stopping us from being present. If we were all born to parents who were fully conscious, fully present, none of this would really be of any necessity. But sadly, that's not the case. So we have to find our path back to who we really are, because we've got lost along the way.
And with the Enneagram specifically, so I'm going to share an image of this when I publish this, but for any viewers, that symbol behind her is an Enneagram. And so it's got the 9 points that point in all these different directions. And the way one point points to the other, that has something to do with your direction of like integration or something. Is that correct? Like how you heal these neuroses that you came in with?
Yeah, some people call it lines of stretch and release. So basically, you take a 3. It can either move to a 6 or a 9. That's the triangle in the middle. And each of those would be aspects of the other personality types, if you like, that they can draw on their journey. So if you are a 3, you will never be a 6 and you'll never be a 9, but you can incorporate some of those attributes as a form of healing. There used to be a thinking that one direction meant where you disintegrated 2, and the other direction where you integrated two. But that thinking has disappeared. And what I think we've come to realize is that you go across to either one of the two numbers that you are linked to at the level you are currently at. And Don Riso and Russ Hudson came up with what they call the levels of health, which is 9 different levels in each type of potential being. So to put it another way, you can either be healthy, or I like to use the word integrated, on an average level, or disintegrated. And each of those 3 has 3 sub-levels in it. So that also means why one personality type, people of the same personality type might appear very different based on how healthy or not healthy. There are other factors which will also influence why they can appear different. But you see, because becoming unconscious or disintegrating is generally a completely unconscious. We're not aware of when we're disintegrating. But we have to consciously do the work to integrate. So it's a journey, and the Enneagram strips bare a lot of the nicey-nices. I think Russ Hudson describes it as tough medicine. So that's why I sometimes have a problem with too much of what 7s are or what 6s are, and everyone is happy because I'm a 7. As if you want to identify with your neurosis. I mean, that's craziness in itself. But there's a lot of that, of which I am quite... I've contributed to that as well, so I have to own that. But the point is not to find our number. That's only the beginning, or our type. That's only the beginning of the journey. The journey is actually to release ourselves from that type.
It's interesting because you just used the word identify with your neuroses, and that was Gurdjieff, who we briefly discussed in email. You're not like a huge student of Gurdjieff, but the Enneagram came from Gurdjieff, and he talked. Well, he was the one who introduced it. He said he found it's this ancient wisdom that he found, but he talks constantly about identifying and self-identifying with our personalities, which, as you just said, are, you could just call your neuroses, these unhealthy aspects of who we are and how we cling on to them. So it's just interesting that you use that terminology. But so in a general sense, have you thought about like the mystery of where this thing came from?
It's so interesting because so many people are very definite about where it came from. And I wish it were that definite in my experience. So that the symbol existed for hundreds of years, I think, is true. That the symbol indicates our passage through this earthly plane and onwards. And I think that's why it was there. But even Gurdjieff himself didn't really identify personality types attached to the symbol. So it was more mystical. They say that the whirling dervishes used to dance the symbol.
Oh, wow, really?
So there are all these things. And then you get Naranjo in a particular interview saying that a lot of the information he kind of basically downloaded off the astral, that it wasn't quite so scientific as people now seem to think it might have been. So which I found that interview very controversial because it went against a lot of what I had previously read. But yeah, I mean, from Gurdjieff you get Ichaza, you can sort of trace a history of where, and each time it moved, it grew in terms of the information attached to it, the personality types. Then Naranjo was the first person who really expanded on those types based on his experience as a psychologist, I think. And, using conventional, like hysteric or whatever conventional personality disorders to attach to each type. And of course, we knew a lot about those personality disorders. So once they were attached to a type, it told us a lot about that type. Because I do believe that, I think it was Ichaza, I think that he only put 4 words or 4 adjectives to each type. So there was very little done and now there's been constant more and more research being done, more and more information being discovered.
Have you ever given any thought to how these might align with like Jungian archetypes? Think there's any similarity there?
Yeah, I once went on a mission with an astrologer to find some links with, between astrology and the Enneagram, and not having a depth of knowledge of astrology. I wasn't able to find them, and likewise her lack of any real Enneagram information. We couldn't find. There were glimpses, but nothing concrete that you could put to. So I think that yes, you're going to find aspects of archetypes in each type, but I don't think you can categorically say that an artist archetype is a 4. Yes, because Picasso was an 8. So you get artists in other. So I don't think it's as clear cut as that.
So could you explain, like we talked about this in a general sense, how I want to feed this into how to apply this to the development of children. But so like in a concrete way, let's say we started, maybe you could use your example, whatever is easiest. How would a specific individual actually functionally, practically use the Enneagram to, make changes in their lives, to improve their lives? Like say somebody's at 1 number, how would you lead them through this?
Once you have identified your number, your type, it comes with it, you will be exposed to healthy or integrated expressions of that type and less integrated expressions. So it brings about an awareness of your habits, why you're starting to do what you do. So whereas before you might have slipped into unconscious behavior and not been aware that your behavior was actually now becoming disintegrated, with the information, you know that when you're becoming disintegrated, which leaves you with that choice, do I want to go with this, or do I want to actually let that habit or behavior go and look towards becoming more integrated? And it's never easy. If you just take something as simple as blame, we love to blame. So making the conscious choice to let go of blame and step into ownership of actually I'm responsible for this on some level. It's I have to own this, is never an easy task. It's not comfortable. So this is not easy work. This is, I think they call it the fourth path, and it's might be quicker on some levels, but that doesn't make it easier.
And when you're talking about these changes, it's not purely psychological, right? Like there's an actual, there's some kind of deeper consciousness, or what some people could call spirituality. Yeah. There's a deeper process at work within our being. Is that correct? Absolutely.
You see, the Enneagram identifies the 3 centers, so that's head, heart, and body. But all encompassing that is the utilization of all those centers to reach wholeness or holiness. Whereas we tend to only function, if we're not healthy, we tend to only function with one of those centers to the detriment of the others.
So do you think that somebody could use this process, use the Enneagram, if they are, like a materialist, atheist sort? Would it still function for them, do you think?
It's a tool. The Enneagram is not a religion as such. In fact, it's best combined with some form of spiritual practice, no matter what that spiritual practice is. But it's a tool that can be very effectively used with whatever your particular choice of spiritual practice is, or indeed if you're an atheist.
So do you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You can't go to a church of Enneagram.
Right. So, So you've written at least 3 books, right? Well, you have the whole kids series, then you have the sex in the Enneagram, and then the cooking in the Enneagram.
It's not cooking as much as eating. It
right.
identifies why different types put on weight, what exercise routines, the physical side of things. Yeah. And
do you personally counsel people on using the Enneagram?
I am a qualified IEQ9 coach, but I find that being a creative person, because I'm also an artist, I tend to spend more time in a creative function. And that's not to say that counseling people can't be creative, because it can be. But I tend to do that more now. In the past, I did spend a lot more time with people. Now I tend to spend more time writing or painting.
And so the new kids series. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You're gonna say something?
No. So originally there was, in fact, 2 days ago, I think, I brought out Better Parenting with the Enneagram, which looks at the 81 combinations between parents and children. So that's quite exciting, because that's just sort of launched now. And then one I did on my own, I self-published it, was looking at creativity in the Enneagram and how what type we are affects how we approach creativity. So that was paint by numbers. And then the kiddies books, I had this feeling that I wanted to let kids can be very judgmental. They can be very harsh. And so if we can help them to understand that different doesn't mean wrong, and that if they learn from a young age, if they can appreciate that everyone has something to offer, and it's not just the strongest, most outspoken kid on the playground who is the only one who is sort of the hero in the other kids' lives, but that each person is a hero, each kid is a hero. And I wanted to bring about acceptance, and I wanted to go over and above, gender and stuff that compartmentalizes us too much. And the latest one I've done, the first 9 books for the kids, were each one was on a different type. And in a way, sometimes it's the same as in art. It's more difficult to paint something really simply well than it is to paint a really realistic, complicated thing. Because every line is important. And so to take an Enneagram journey for each type and condense it into a sort of 36-page kiddie story was actually quite difficult. And that's what I wanted, because I wanted an adult reading it to kind of even get what their journey might be in a simplified way, because a lot of us don't have a huge amount of time, and to sit and plow our way through long books can sometimes be, you're tired, it feels like a mission. Whereas reading your child a story at night, and if you could get the real core of what each type, the struggle they face, then I would have done a good job.
And so with the parenting in the Enneagram, the parenting with using the Enneagram to parent your children, one question before we get into the specifics of that, this just actually came to me. So in this, like you're saying that we're born with this kind of like almost like a mission. We have this neurosis that we have to work through in order to integrate and to grow. Are our parents like an intentional, conscious part of that process, do you think? Like, are we placed in a certain position with certain parents, and our parents placed in a certain position with children as part of this mission, this process to overcome and grow?
It's my belief that yes, we are. I fully accept that not everyone would agree with me, and that's okay. But if you're asking me personally, from a personal perspective, yes. Okay. I mean, I know why I had to have one mother. It was And so it was part of my growth process to have experienced that.
No, I love that perspective. I think that'd be really, it's like a beautiful and healing way to look at the world, that, all these things, even if they weren't ideal, you brought them in for a reason, right? Like you chose this for a reason. I've always considered that a really just kind of beautiful and empowering idea. But so, all right, with the parenting aspect, can you go into how the Enneagram can be used in that sense?
Sure. So if you look, we get these kids. Most of us are tired and shell-shattered when they arrive. Okay, we really don't know what we're dealing with. And so we do the best we can. I mean, there are very few parents who don't try and do the best they can given what resources they've got. But we neither understand our parenting type, and very often we don't always understand our kids. So what we tend to do as humans, if people aren't doing things the way we think they should be doing them, we make them wrong. So looking at through the lens of the Enneagram, there are 9 ways to parent. And once again, each one of those ways carries with it pluses and maybe things that are not so great in the terms of being a parent. So if we know that, we can then consciously work on our strengths. And we then accept ourselves as parents. Okay, so I'm not really great with this. Well, hold on. I have a partner who's a different type. And maybe that's their strength. So maybe if they handle this part of things, I could handle that part of things. At the same time, I could also grow that aspect of myself. So, for instance, as a 5, I don't know if you have children.
I don't.
Well, 5s tend to only enjoy parenting older children. They're not that keen on young babies and stuff. They like a child who's old enough you can get their concepts, you can understand the project they're working on and that kind of thing. So that would be an example. But understanding that about yourself, then you can find ways to still parent a younger child. So maybe you can settle them down with a book and you sit next to them with a book. So you're both sort of meeting on some level, but you're not getting that frustration of having to sit looking at a 4-year-old when you've got all these things that you want to do and seeing the child as almost using up your time that you would otherwise have been spending on your latest project. So that would be an example. So what I've then done is taken and also given suggestions as to how to improve each type's parenting skills. And then I look at children, and then in a separate area, teenagers. And then I say, right, children, do we understand our child? If we kind of get where they're coming from, even if we're not 100% certain of what type they are, and that, by the way, is a danger to type your children too early, because children do imitate other children and they are influenced by the environment. And so it can be quite harmful to say to a 4-year-old, oh, you're just being a 7 or something. Some children are very easy to identify, but it's best kept to yourself, not expressed to them. That being said, what the book does, that the other book has done before, is it takes the 81 combinations of parents and children. So if you're a 9 parent, how do you relate to, let's say, if you have a 6th child, and what that looks like from a healthy perspective and from a not so healthy perspective.
So you give the means for the parents to identify their own type, correct?
Yes.
At what age? Because you do have the series of the Enneagram for kids. At about what age do you think kids are starting to kind of coalesce enough that maybe they can accurately identify where they fall?
It very much differs on the child, the same way as it differs on adults. I run workshops on the Enneagram, and sometimes Well, certainly I did prior COVID. But what happens is someone comes in and, they barely listen to a brief description of their type. And they're saying, oh, wow, that's me. That's so me, And then other people leave the workshop feeling, there's about 3 types I could potentially be. It's the same with children. I find particularly 8 children are fairly easy to identify, but you can't categorically say they are because, as I said, for the reasons I gave earlier. Children often, and that's what I love about the books, children often, in reading the series, because it's called names like Type 1 is Percy Perfect and Hazel Helper and Sally Star and so on. Often in reading that, they self-identify. And of course, with all of us, that is the best way. I mean, you can do tests and you can do all the stuff, but to self-identify through reading books, through observation of other people, that is where the true benefit lies, I believe, because you now own it. If I just get told by somebody or some website what I am, I don't really own it completely, I don't believe. It's a journey. It's a journey to self. So if it takes you a long time to identify yourself, that's part of the journey. And hint, always start, if you're not sure, with the type that you least want to be.
Yeah, I think it's interesting now. I see this in myself, and I assume it's relatively common. Is that like I actually feel more trust in like an objective test than I do in my own like intuition. You know what I mean? Because it's just like the world. It's how I am anyway. I'm just constantly like, well, I don't know. My mind plays tricks on me. Maybe I'm going to misinterpret it. And like, give me a good hard objective test. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think like what you're saying is accurate because ultimately, I don't even think you could effectively make an objective test in that way. Although I guess you do have some pretty extensive testing these days.
There's some, sorry?
No, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
No, there are some, some organizations who claim 95% accuracy. I don't altogether believe that. It's a help, but I wouldn't. I've seen too many people being mistyped by tests to say that, that's the be all and end all.
So I don't know exactly what the COVID situation is where you live, but will you be able to do some signings and tour the book a little bit? Do some get-togethers?
The thing is about being in the bottom end of Africa is that it's very difficult for us to locally, whilst the books are now available in the US and in the UK, I think at the beginning of next month, it will be months before they arrive on our shores because everything's got to be shipped.
Oh, really?
And it will take, 3 months or something at least before the books arrive here.
Wow, that's so wild. So the rest of the world, like I'll be able to get your book before you will.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's wild. That's got to be an interesting scenario to live in.
Hey, we live with lions. What can I say?
That's fascinating. Well, yeah. Man,
I could order it here through Amazon or something. I could do, but that would take probably a week or two for it to arrive here. But I couldn't get it in the bookshops for the next couple of months.
Right. Oh, so you do have Amazon there, though.
We don't have Amazon that prints here, so we have to order the book. It gets printed in the US or UK and then sent to us here.
I see. Do your maybe this is too personal of a question. Do your sales generally, are they heavier in your native country, or do you get more of your sales from the US and the UK?
Oh, definitely in the US and UK.
Yeah.
We're a very small, how can I say, education is a huge problem here. So for most people, survival is what it's about. Spending extra money on their levels of integration is not where people's prime, it's not where people primarily are going to spend their money because they'll spend it on food, understandably.
Well, that's interesting that you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, there's a relatively large group of Enneagram enthusiasts here, and there's lots of coaches and stuff who work with corporations and business and so on. But it's not on the scale that it is in America and in England.
Is spirituality is like a spiritual perspective in general popular where you live?
Yes, I would say there is. Yeah. I would say there is, both in a sort of primal way that's come up from a tribal way of thinking, talking to the ancestors and so on, and then as well as that also, I mean, the fact that people like Russ Hudson and Rosalind Bruyere and many of the great spiritual teachers, if you like, have come to this country, would say that they have identified a following here.
Is this, I didn't think to check, is this, is the parenting book your first one with inner traditions?
No, it's not. I wrote it's a third one with inner traditions, but Findhorn is actually the publisher, and they are an imprint of inner traditions. And with Findhorn, I've done about 6 books, I think, now.
Okay. Oh, so there's this old hat for you. You have an established relationship with them.
I do, yeah.
Is old hat, do you recognize that?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. All right.
I get that, yeah. I get that.
After I said it, I realized she might not have any idea what I'm talking about. But,
I don't know.
So, all right. So in addition to the book that's coming out and the children's series of books, do you have any other projects you would like to give people a heads up about?
No, other than that, if people want individual counseling, and if they want to go the professional test route, what I do is I offer a service where they take the test and then we look at it. It's 20 odd pages of us, that comes back, and then we work through it. We look at blind spots, we look at areas of development potential, and so on. So I'm happy to do that, but I can't take on a huge amount of people because I'm writing or painting.
So obviously you can't put, this isn't science, it's not exact, but in general, if somebody really commits themselves to this Enneagram path of self-development, is this a 50-year process? Can somebody just go in and knock it out in a week?
I think that you can't generalize because I think everyone's different. I mean, sometimes you'll find, I think I speak under correction here, but I believe Eckhart Tolle was he was a ex-drug addict hobo on the street, really, when he had the realization for his book. So he went from kind of zero to hero almost overnight. And other people, the journey takes many, many lifetimes. And I believe that it's not a race because time is all relative and it doesn't really exist as we know it anyhow. So it's not a line, it's not a linear process.
That's a great way to put people at ease, to just say, don't worry, time doesn't actually exist. It's all fine. It's all fine. You're just hallucinating anyway. But
enjoy the journey. I mistype myself, but I'm so grateful for all the types that I thought I was, because I really learned about those types in experiencing myself as those types. So would I have thrown those years away and found my type the first workshop I went to? I don't think I would. Think I would, because it deepens my sense of experiencing people. And it now gets the point that you can almost, when you're with someone, you can pick up what type they are just from being present with that person. Now, would I want to throw that away to gallop to the finish line? No, I don't think I would, Because it's all about Yeah?
No, go ahead, please.
It's all about collecting experiences, having experiences. If we cut to the chase, then we miss out on so much of that experience. So what did they say? He will be last, will be first, and he'll be first, will be last.
Right. Do you mind saying what your type is?
No, I don't mind. I'm a 9.
A 9. And what is that one?
They're the best ones in the Enneagram without a doubt.
Of course they are. That's the pinnacle, right?
Yeah, that is, absolutely. No, 9s are what's known as the Peacemaker. So we fear being separated from the mothership, from others. And so although we are one of the anger types, we tend to suppress our anger because to get angry would mean to alienate people, and that's the last thing we want to do. So we make good mediators. We can bring people together. I can go on much longer about the 9, but that's the principle of our wounding.
Did you realize this after you'd already been doing the work you've been doing? Because it seems like you were already doing work that fits that type well.
No, as I say, I thought I was a 6 for a while. I believed I was a 7 for quite a long time. I never wanted to be a 9 because my understanding of 9s was they were very idle, and I couldn't possibly be that because I've written 37 books and that couldn't be me. And basically, yeah, I didn't like the concept of a 9. And yet when I realized that I had actually largely misunderstood the way 9s had been described, and that being slothful doesn't necessarily mean parking up in front of the television with popcorn. It can also mean not showing up for yourself, merging with others, putting everything else first before yourself, not valuing yourself. So that is very much a 9 trait.
So you just said sloth, and that reminds me, are all the types associated with one of the deadly sins? Is that true?
That's absolutely true, but there is a problem because there's 7 deadly sins.
Right.
And there are 9 types. So 2 of this, if you go back into the history of the Bible, there were in fact more deadly sins.
Really?
But a couple of them fell off along the wayside. So fear being one, and what they call vainglory, which is the 3's issue. But they were, according to my research, there in the original version. But then they kind of joined and blended with some of the other. So you get pride, that's a 2. You get gluttony, avarice, that's a 5. Gluttony 7, greed 8. And that explains why if you take an 8, greed, there's an immediacy about an 8. They want it and they want it now, and they don't care if it belongs to someone else or whatever. There's a I've got to have it and I've got to have it now. So it's not necessarily for food, although it can be, but it's a greed to get something straight away. Whereas it's slightly different with the 7 and their gluttony, because they just want everything. They want to be at that barbecue and have everything that's available, every salad, every roll. They want to taste everything in life. So it's slightly different. And then, the sloth for the 9 and so on.
That's fascinating. I did not know that about the missing deadly sins. That's really interesting. You said fear was one of them.
Fear, and then for the 3, what they call vainglory, which is, I suppose, would you call it self-interest? But really, it's 3s create this inauthentic self, or they create this self they would like to be, and then they try and be that inauthentic self.
In one way to get strokes, I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
In order to get strokes, in order to get the feel that sense of achievement, okayness.
in one way to conceptualize the process of overcoming your neuroses to grow is that you are overcoming the pull of the associated deadly sin.
Correct, yes. Correct.
Man, that's really fascinating stuff. And so what was the number 5's deadly sin?
Avarice.
Avarice. Okay.
So can I unpack that for you?
What was that?
Can I unpack that for you?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
So 5s believe there isn't enough of anything in the world. So you have to hold on to your limited resources. So 5s will often try and minimize their needs. If I take my husband, he is happy to eat the same food every single day. Why go out and buy a lot of other food when you know that this is what you like, so you eat that, So it's not, people associate with stinginess. It's not stinginess at all. It's like, I don't have enough time. So if I expend time on something, it's got to be really of worth or value. And superficial socializing is of no value to a 5. So I don't really want to go out and have that kind of interaction with people because I would rather work on the project that I'm involved in. It's just a waste of time. 5s always sit closest to the door at any social event so they can leave as quickly as they possibly can, unless it's something that interests them particularly. But that's where that holding on to resources, holding on to, in a very disintegrated state, a lot of 5s would be your hoarders. We've got to keep every magazine, everything, because I may need it in the future. But that's only at a very disintegrated level. It's not every 5.
And so in a general sense, how would you get the 5 to a healthy place? How would the 5 confront that deadly sin?
Well, 5s believe that knowledge is power. They're one of the fear types. So the more knowledge they have, the less vulnerable they feel they'll be. So they acquire a huge amount of knowledge, and they're often extremely intelligent. At their disintegrated state, they're going to think, well, giving this information out to other people is like giving pearls to swine. So it's not worth doing. But at their more integrated state, they move to that 8 aspect of themselves, and they start sharing the information with the world. They start sharing their incredible findings, their amazing inventions, whatever it is that they have concocted in their brilliant minds, and they take that and they start sharing it, as opposed to, I must hold it all within, to keep it for myself.
No, that's fascinating stuff. And I just, not going to lie, I just kind of use this to get tips for myself. So that's something that I can start, that's something that I can start using. But, man, yeah, thank you so much for that. And, thank you so much for this just this discussion. This has been awesome. And, best luck with the book. You said it actually went live just like a few days ago, right?
Yeah, you could have pre-ordered it for months, but it went live in the US, I think, on Monday. Better Parenting with the Enneagram. There you go.
Awesome. Well, I hope it's a smashing success for you, and I really appreciate it. This is so fascinating. I wanted to have this conversation with somebody who knew what they were talking about forever. So for purely selfish reasons, this has been awesome. But I also think all my listeners are going to love this. So thank you.
Pleasure, and thank you for having me on the show.
It's definitely my pleasure. Yeah, man. All right. So, you're actually the first South African I've ever spoken with.
Okay. Well,
so, it's kind of cool for me.
It was. I hope you don't think you're never them again.
No, definitely not. But all right, thank you so much. I appreciate this, and best luck with the book. And maybe we'll talk again sometime.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne.
Ciao.
Take care.
Bye-bye.